So, while this is a Moose video, this will be a lot less jokey and a bit more analytical than the Death Note video. While I very much enjoyed making it, and I do love joking around, I think that for media such as television shows and movies, I can, on average, be a bit more, not, I'd say, separate myself from the work per se, as it is an art form that can have a profound impact on you and your feelings, etc. But I feel like it's a medium that you can enjoy with others, no matter what, positive or negative, and it really doesn't matter. And it's not to say that music cannot be that either, but I feel music is something, at least to me, very intimate and personal. It can transport you to a time or a place with specific people you were or weren't talking to, things going on in your life, beginnings, endings, etc., etc. And I feel that for me, while I wouldn't call myself a musician in any way, shape, or form, it has played a huge aspect in my life, my connections, and it's very vulnerable for me. Like genuinely, it's uncomfortable for me to be vulnerable in a group setting at the very least, but especially on the internet. So I hope you forgive me if this video is less comedic overall. And if you don't, I don't know, nigga, I don't make this shit for y'all. I do this shit for me, so suck a railroad spike and jump onto a traffic and die, ho. But if you are fucking with it and want to see more of these videos, leave me a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Help the algorithm out, you know, all that bullshit. I would like to reach 500 subscribers, which I believe is achievable by the end of the year. I'm just making stuff, and it's the best way to support the channel. It's free, and it gives me direct feedback on how to move forward, you know, to know if you guys are fucking with this. So yeah, share it around and all that good stuff. Thank you. Now let's get into the beauty of DEMONDICE's 2019 Kakigori Galaxy Astronaut album. Holy shit, that's a mouthful. Let's just call it the KGA album for sure. Yeah, I fuck with that. Let's do that. 7 years later since its release date, what makes the KGA album so compelling isn't simply its themes of ambition, perseverance, or individuality. It's the album's willingness to embrace contradiction. Throughout KGA, DEMONDICE presents herself as simultaneously confident and insecure, cynical and hopeful, ambitious and disillusioned. Rather than hiding these conflicting emotions behind a carefully curated persona, she places them at the center of the album. Through songs like Wannabe, Legendary Stray, and Alternative, KGA explores the uncomfortable reality of chasing a dream while constantly questioning your own worth, ultimately arguing that growth isn't about overcoming those contradictions, but learning to move forward alongside them. A lot of music, especially within mainstream culture, revolves around presentation. Whether it's rap, pop, rock, hell, even internet personalities, there is often an unspoken pressure to project an image, the best version of yourself. Success becomes something to be displayed. No one ever wants to show the ugliness, unlikable, and non-desirable parts of themselves. The message is often less about who the artist truly is and more about who they want the audience to believe they are. And even when artists do choose to be vulnerable, that vulnerability is often carefully curated. They'll pull back the curtain just enough to reveal a flaw or a darker side of themselves, hinting at a complex human being behind the persona, but rarely do they tear the mask off completely. And honestly, that's understandable. It's terrifying to do that in the first place. It's difficult enough being fully honest with the people closest to you, let alone exposing those parts of yourself to thousands or even millions of complete strangers. And that's why the KGA album feels so refreshing. For example, when I'm listening to songs like Wannabe, I don't really get the sense that DEMONDICE is trying to impress anybody. If anything, she's actively exposing parts of herself that most people would probably much rather keep hidden. It's not exactly flattering, like in the slightest. The jealousy, the bitterness, the insecurity, the resentment toward artists who seem more successful. The contradiction of wanting recognition, while simultaneously despising the very systems in place that grant it. Wanting people to admire her, yet not wanting them to become her. Wanting to be seen, while quietly believing that if people truly understood what was going on beneath the surface, they wouldn't envy her at all. At least from my interpretation of Wannabe, DEMONDICE doesn't come across as someone who genuinely likes herself. Rather, she sounds more like someone frustrated by the gap between where she is and where she believes she should be. She looks around at artists who, in her eyes, are less skilled, less thoughtful, or less authentic, yet seem to possess every damn thing she wants. The recognition, the influence, the success, and validation. The result is a mixture of resentment, of envy, of arrogance, and self-doubt that constantly pushes and pulls against itself throughout the entire song. These kinds of emotions that make someone look cool or enlightened. Quite frankly, it's incredibly fucking messy and uncomfortable, but like also deeply human? Yet she puts all of this on full display anyway. When DEMONDICE spends an entire song criticizing other rappers, the point isn't that she's objectively right about every criticism she's making. The point is that she's being frank. She isn't pretending to be above those feelings. She isn't disguising them behind a carefully constructed persona. By the end of Wannabe, when she admits, "But really you don't want to be like me," the mask completely falls away. Suddenly the song isn't about other artists anymore. It's about her. It's about someone struggling with the gap between who they are and who they wish they could be. That vulnerability extends throughout the entire album. If Wannabe is the moment where the mask comes off and DEMONDICE exposes the uglier side of ambition, then Legendary Stray feels like the aftermath of that realization. Legendary Stray acknowledges disappointment, failed expectations, and the painful realization that the people you idolize may very well just never acknowledge your existence. What's interesting is that the song doesn't suddenly resolve the emotions introduced in Wannabe. DEMONDICE doesn't wake up one day free of envy, insecurity, or disappointment. If anything, I feel like Legendary Stray acknowledges those wounds even more directly than Wannabe did. One of the most striking moments in the song comes during the second verse. The fear of the sheer love for people that I idolized, hideous indifference had cut me down to size. It's a surprisingly vulnerable admission. Most artists spend years looking up to people who inspired them. They study their work, admire their accomplishments, and imagine what it would be like to stand on the same stage as them one day. Yet, eventually, many creatives encounter a painful realization. The people who shaped your life may never know you exist, and if they do, they may not care. You know, the whole saying, never meet your heroes, right? The realization isn't necessarily malicious. Those idols don't owe us nor anybody else their attention, but that doesn't make the disappointment hurt any less. In Wannabe, DEMONDICE's frustration is largely directed outward. Other artists become targets for her resentment. Success becomes something to criticize because she personally feels excluded from it. In Legendary Stray, that frustration becomes introspection. Instead of asking why everyone else is succeeding, DEMONDICE begins questioning why she is measuring herself against them in the first place. The song repeatedly returns to ideas of movement, wandering, and drifting through space. The image of the stray is particularly important because a stray is, by definition, something without a home, something that doesn't belong. Most people would look at that and see it as a tragedy. DEMONDICE takes that sort of framework and reframes it as freedom. The title itself is almost paradoxical, reflecting back to the duality of this album. A stray is forgotten, a legend is oft remembered. One implies insignificance, the other greatness. By combining the two, the song creates a new identity for itself, someone who refuses to let conventional standards determine their worth. This is where the duality of DEMONDICE's ego continues to evolve. In Wannabe, her ego inflates itself through comparison. She elevates herself by tearing others down. The insecurity and arrogance exist side by side. In Legendary Stray, that duality still exists, but it's changing form. DEMONDICE still wants to matter. She still wants her voice to be heard. She still wants to leave a mark on the world, but she is beginning to separate those desires from society's definition of success. The song openly rejects the obsession with status, image, and material achievement in the verse focused in on cars, cash, stars, image, and wealth. Instead of chasing those things, DEMONDICE romanticizes the life of a wanderer, someone moving forward without guarantees, without approval, and without certainty. What's fascinating is that this isn't a rejection of ambition. In fact, it's a redefinition. She hasn't stopped chasing her dream. She's stopped letting other people define what that dream is supposed to look like. That distinction is important because Legendary Stray is not a song about giving up, it's a song about letting go. Letting go of old expectations, letting go of old idols, letting go of old resentments, letting go of the idea that success can only be measured through recognition or popularity, something that's very prevalent in today's music, in today's society, in today's culture. The song itself even acknowledges Demondice's own hypocrisy. This is coming from the chick who said, "Fuck the new wave." That's one of the most self-aware lines on the album. She recognizes that she has spent years resisting change, resisting trends, and resisting the very future itself. Now, she's confronting the possibility that clinging to those frustrations has only held her back. In many ways, Legendary Stray feels like Demondice standing at a crossroads. One path leads back toward the bitterness of Wannabe. The other leads to growth, evolution. And while she hasn't fully arrived yet, she's beginning to move in that direction in this song. The song's optimism isn't one of someone who's conquered their insecurities. Legendary Stray's optimism feels like someone who has accepted that those insecurities may never completely disappear. The difference is that she refuses to let them stop her from moving forward. That's why that song feels like such a natural bridge between Wannabe and Alternative. Wannabe asks, why do they have everything while I have nothing? Legendary Stray asks, why am I measuring myself by their standards at all? And Alternative finally answers, maybe I should just make my own fucking path. Alternative acknowledges uncertainty and failure while still encouraging people to move forward. The song feels like the culmination of everything established in both Wannabe and Legendary Stray. Not because it resolves every insecurity or contradiction introduced throughout the album, but because it offers a healthier answer to them. Where Wannabe is fueled by comparison and Legendary Stray is fueled by liberation, Alternative is fueled by possibility. The title itself is layered with meaning. At first glance, Alternative simply suggests a different path, but when separated into Alternative, the phrase takes on additional meanings: to alter yourself, to alter your perspective, to remain true to your nature while still changing and growing. The song is ultimately about realizing that there is no single correct path to success. And for someone who spent much of the album measuring herself against others, that's an incredibly important realization to have. One of the most striking aspects of the song is its role as a conversation across time. Illbell's verse speaks directly to a younger version of himself. This is a song to tell the younger me who admired that distant scenery that the dream has already come true. It's a beautiful sentiment because it challenges one of the most destructive aspects of ambition, the tendency to constantly move the goalposts. Many creatives spend their entire lives chasing the next achievement, the next milestone, the next breakthrough. They become so focused on where they haven't arrived that they forget how far they've already come. For the first time on the album, the perspective shifts away from what is lacking and toward what has already been achieved. That's a major contrast from Wannabe. In Wannabe, Demondice's eyes are locked on everyone ahead of her. In Alternative, she's finally able to look backward and recognize the distance she's already traveled. The song repeatedly encourages experimentation, creativity, and perseverance. If you can't decide on the right path, why not take two? That line may be one of the most important on the entire track, because it directly challenges the mindset that creates so much anxiety for ambitious people. The fear of choosing wrong, the fear of falling behind, I've had that several times. The fear that everyone else somehow has life figured out while you're still searching for direction. Alternative rejects that mindset entirely. Rather than treating life as a single road with a single destination, the song embraces uncertainty. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to know exactly where you're going. You simply need to keep moving forward. This is where the song becomes a true answer to Wannabe. In Wannabe, Demondice's self-worth is heavily tied to external validation. Recognition becomes proof of value. Success becomes proof of talent. Being overlooked becomes proof of failure. The result is an endless cycle of comparison, but Alternative quietly dismantles that worldview. Instead of asking whether other people approve of you, it asks whether you're pursuing something meaningful to yourself. Instead of asking whether you've already succeeded, it asks whether you're still willing to even try. Instead of asking whether you're good enough, it asks whether you've given up. The song's optimism is particularly powerful because it doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from experience. This isn't the optimism of someone who has never failed. It's the optimism of someone who has failed repeatedly and still believes tomorrow is worth chasing. That's why lines like, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And don't misunderstand me. I know that everybody and their grandma has heard this phrase before. Coming from anybody else, in my opinion, this might sound a little bit of like a cliche. Coming after the emotional vulnerability of Wannabe, though, and the self-reflection of legendary Stray, they feel earned. The song understands how difficult it is to keep believing in yourself. And we've all been there before. It simply argues that the attempt is worthwhile anyway. Most importantly, Alternative doesn't erase the duality of DEMONDICE's ego. It accepts it. The insecurity from Wannabe never fully disappears. The longing and uncertainty from legendary Stray never fully disappear. The difference is that DEMONDICE no longer seems interested in defeating those parts of herself. Instead, she learns how to move forward alongside them, like she's accepted her Persona 4 shadow. I am the shadow, the true self. And honestly, that may be the album's most important lesson. Growth isn't about becoming a completely different person. It's about learning how to live with the contradictions that already exist inside you, inside all of us. The ambitious side, the insecurities, the cynical, the hope, the side that wants recognition, and the side that simply wants to make things, to create. Throughout the KGA album, these voices are often in conflict with one another, but in Alternative, they finally seem to be moving in the right direction, which is why the song feels less like another chapter in the story and more like its thesis statement. Not be better than everyone else, not stop caring entirely, but rather create your own path and keep moving forwards. Don't let other people or the world we live in decide what your dream is supposed to look like. If you have a dream, don't wait, act. That's one of life's little rules. Up to this point, the album has been exploring ambition from every angle imaginable. The envy that comes with it, the freedom that comes from redefining it, and the hope required to keep pursuing it. But Astronaut feels different. It feels less concerned with success and more concerned with the loneliness that can accompany the pursuit of it. What's fascinating is that Astronaut continues many of the same themes established earlier in the album, but reframes them through a much lonelier lens. Throughout KGA, DEMONDICE is constantly searching for a place where she belongs. In Wannabe, that search manifests as frustration and resentment toward an industry she desperately wants to succeed in. In Legendary Stray, she begins to accept her position on the outside, reframing it as a freedom rather than failure. But Astronaut takes that a step further. The distance between herself and the world around her has grown so vast that being an outsider is no longer just a circumstance, it's become a part of her identity. The song feels less concerned with success, and more concerned with the emotional consequences pursuing it. What happens when you spent years chasing a dream, yet still feel disconnected from the people around you? What happens when you've learned to stop measuring yourself by other people's standards, but still haven't found where you truly belong? That's where the astronaut imagery becomes so powerful. An astronaut isn't simply someone who is alone, they're someone suspended between worlds. Too far from home to return easily, yet still searching for something ahead of them. Throughout the song, DEMONDICE feels trapped in that same emotional space, not entirely connected to the people around her, but unable to stop reaching outward all the same. In many ways, Astronaut feels like the moment where the album stops asking, who do I want to become? And starts asking, where do I belong? Sidebar real fast. Looking at DEMONDICE's later work, what's particularly interesting to me is how often this feeling of isolation continues to resurface, even after she achieves many of the things she was chasing throughout the KGA album. Conventional wisdom tells us that loneliness is something that exists before success. Once you're recognized, respected, and surrounded by people who appreciate your work, those feelings are supposed to naturally disappear. Yet, DEMONDICE's music often suggests the opposite. Success may solve certain problems, but it doesn't necessarily resolve the deeper question. In some ways, isolation seems less like a temporary obstacle in DEMONDICE's music and more like a recurring condition. Whether she's an unknown indie artist struggling to be noticed, or a creator with a significantly larger audience, there remains a persistent feeling of existing slightly outside the space she inhabits. Not fully disconnected, but never entirely at home either. Perhaps that's because recognition and understanding are not the same thing. An audience can grow, opportunities can increase, accomplishments can accumulate, yet those things don't automatically eliminate the distance between how a person is perceived and who they actually are. That's one reason Astronaut feels so fascinating in retrospect. What initially sounds like the frustration of a smaller artist struggling to find her place gradually reveals itself as something more universal. The song isn't simply about obscurity, it's about the strange loneliness that can emerge whenever you feel fundamentally out of step with the world around you. And if that's true, then Astronaut becomes less of a snapshot of where DEMONDICE was in 2019 and more of an enduring part of who she is as an artist. The loneliness of Astronaut comes from feeling disconnected from everyone else. The loneliness of Hazy Skyscraper, however, feels more difficult to name. It's the kind that lingers even when the room or the world is crowded, when people are close enough to touch, and yet somehow still impossibly far away. By the time Hazy Skyscraper begins, the question is no longer whether DEMONDICE is alone. The more troubling possibility is that she may have found exactly what she was searching for and still feels disconnected from it. And honestly, that's probably why Hazy Skyscraper is my favorite song on the album. What stands out to me isn't the loneliness itself. Plenty of songs are about loneliness. What makes Hazy Skyscraper interesting is that it examines the gap between being around people and feeling understood by them. The song recognizes that connection and understanding are not the same thing, as I mentioned earlier. You can have friends, you can have a community, you can spend time with people every day and still feel as though an important part of yourself remains inaccessible, like you have walls put up around you. That's why the line, "I can smile with basically anyone, but the riddle's in who I can frown beside," hits really hard for me. The question isn't who you're willing to spend time with, it's who you're willing to be honest with when you're really struggling. And I think that's what DEMONDICE is searching for throughout the entire song, understanding. The ending reinforces this idea in a way I find particularly compelling. Throughout the song, there is this lingering hope that somewhere out there exists a person who sees the world the same way she does, someone who understands her completely. But by the final chorus, that hope starts to unravel. I realize that you just exist within my mind. The song arrives at a difficult conclusion. The person she has been searching for may not even exist. For me at least, that's what elevates Hazy Skyscraper above the rest of the album. It's not simply asking whether we're lonely. It's questioning whether being fully understood by another person is even remotely possible. And that's a question that resonated with me deeply when I first heard this song back in 2019. Sorry, this is gonna get a little bit personal, but at that time, I was struggling quite a bit. I was bouncing between jobs, unhappy with where I was in life, insecure about my art, and dealing with some of the worst anxiety and depression I'd experienced up to that point. Listening to Hazy Skyscraper felt strangely personal. It was one of those rare songs that didn't really feel like it was describing a general feeling, it felt like it was describing my feelings. As ridiculous as it sounds, it genuinely felt like someone had somehow written a song about my life specifically. And what's funny about that is that people who know me personally probably wouldn't expect something like that. I'm loud, I'm extroverted, I'm passionate, I'm usually the person who is talking way too much rather than too little. But that's part of why this song connected with me personally so strongly. being outgoing doesn't automatically make someone emotionally open. Even after years of therapy and a lot of personal growth on my part, I still find myself hesitant to fully reveal what's going on in my head. There's always that fear that if people see the parts of you that aren't polished, confident, socially acceptable, they'll judge you for them. Maybe they'll reject you. Maybe they'll see you differently, right? Hazy's Skyscraper for me captures that tension better than almost any other song I've heard. The desire to be understood, the fear of being understood, the search for connection, the instinct to pull away from it. That's why the song has stuck with me for so long. I love the Kakigori Galaxy Astronaut album as a whole. Not because I think it could win a Grammy or something, or because the album is particularly phenomenal in every aspect of, musical artistry, but because of how honest it is. But Hazy Skyscraper was that moment that honesty stopped feeling observational and it started feeling more personal. It's the song that made me feel seen. And it's probably the song that turned me from someone who, maybe was casually supporting and enjoyed DEMONDICE's music into someone who legitimately became a fan of it. By the time we arrive at Soundless, something has changed. Throughout the album, DEMONDICE is constantly searching for answers. In Wannabe, she's searching for recognition. In Legendary Stray, she's searching for a path that belongs to her, and that is the bridge with Alternative, right? In Astronaut, she's searching for belonging. In Hazy Skyscraper, she's searching for understanding. Every song is built around question. Soundless is the first song that seems willing to accept that there may not be an answer. What immediately stands out to me is how different DEMONDICE sounds here. The bravado from Wannabe is completely gone. The rebellious energy of Legendary Stray, gone. Even the hopeful determination of Alternative feels very distant. What's left is only the uncertainty. The truth is, I do not. DEMONDICE spent a lot of time trying to define herself. Well, for DEMONDICE when we met her at the beginning of the album. The version of herself in Wannabe always had an opinion, was very, had a target, always had an explanation for why things weren't working. But Soundless strips all of that away. It's like ego death. For an album so deeply concerned with ego, I think that's incredibly important, because ego isn't just arrogance. Ego is also the story we tell ourselves about who we are. The belief that we understand ourselves, the belief that we know where we're going, the belief that we can make sense of our suffering if we think hard enough and work hard enough, right? Throughout the KGA album, artist, outsider, stray, astronaut, dreamer. But Soundless feels like the moment she stops trying to force an identity onto herself. Instead of declaring who she is, she simply admits that she doesn't know. And strangely enough, that's the most honest moment for the entire album, I think. Genuinely, there's a concept sometimes associated with ego death where growth doesn't come from discovering some grand truth about yourself. It comes from realizing how much certainty you were clinging to in the first place. Not certainty that you're great or that you're terrible, just certainty. Soundless feels like that realization. The song repeatedly reaches toward meaning only to let it slip away. And maybe that's the point, because the album begins with DEMONDICE trying to desperately to be heard. By the end, being heard no longer seems to be the goal. Creating is. One of the most important lines in the song comes near the end. Creating endlessly, I guess I'll go on. It's such an understated conclusion that it's, at least to me, it's easy to miss. There's no triumphant hurrah or breaker. It's very melancholy, actually. She simply continues, and I think that's what makes Soundless such a powerful ending to the KGA album. The album never really resolves the duality at the center of DEMONDICE's ego. In the end, she never truly overcomes any of her negative traits. They still exist within her heart, but it's not the only thing present. Being human is often wrought with contradiction, as we are not perfect creatures. I'm not perfect, my friends and family aren't perfect, you're not perfect, we are not perfect. All we can do is move forward, solve the problems before us, and be conscious of our relationship with both our light and our darknesses. Earlier in the album, she treats those contradictions like problems that need to be solved. By the end, she seems to understand that they are simply part of being human. The answer was never to eliminate them. The answer was to keep moving forward in spite of them. DEMONDICE is still ambitious, she's still insecure, she's still searching. What changes is that she stops treating those parts of herself as problems to solve. The KGA album begins as a struggle for validation and ends with an acceptance of uncertainty. That's the resolution. Forgive me, this is no longer scripted. This is just me talking. I probably trim this down because I can probably ramble for a long time, honestly. Do I think that this is the greatest album of all time? No. Do I think that this album deserves a Grammy or something? No, I don't think that at all. I don't even believe in awards for art in the first place. I think it's a fucking pretentious way for rich people to be pompous fucking assholes. But do I love the album? Absolutely. From beginning to end, I love this. I obviously have songs I prefer, like any other album. Lots of people do that. This album isn't the greatest of all time, and I don't think it needs to be, quite frankly. I think that the metric of whether something is good or bad by numbers or how many Grammys it wins or whatever, it's all arbitrary. I feel like a lot of music really boils down to personal taste, and it's ultimately subjective. The reason that I love this album so much, the reason that I believe in my heart that it's so beautiful, is that it's so raw, it's so unfiltered, truly vulnerable about how she felt at this point in her life, and maybe some of those feelings persist. I don't know, right? But I think when I met her in 2015 at Anime Expo through a mutual friend, and saw the workaholic nature of her at a place where, she should be relaxing, and then connecting with her, not super personally, but connecting with her and seeing her Tumblr and her comic and the ups and downs of her personal grievances with her work, the self-doubt and frustrations on her old Tumblr account, all those years ago, and seeing those feelings congregate and be reflected in this album. It really resonated with me, who was going through my own things at the time, right? You know the story of the struggling artist and blah, 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 right? And then for her to come out of that mud and have a great deal of success with her music and her other projects, to see her receive her flowers, the accolades, and be congratulated for all the potential that I and many others, right, have seen in her all those years ago. It was surreal. I was popping the fuck off, right? This level of whimsical yet vulnerable nature, I don't see it very often in people's music, or at least in too many mainstream musicians, other than maybe Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale album, right? Or stuff by the Gorillaz. At the bare minimum, I need to diversify my musical palette, right? But what to end this off, give something that you haven't considered giving a try, a genuine try. It doesn't have to be this album. It definitely doesn't have to be. This album is not for everybody. That's perfectly fine. I think it's fair to like things. I think it's fair to dislike things. That's perfectly okay. But give something that you've never thought of giving a try. Genuinely, just be whimsical, man. Fuck it. Life is so short. Just enjoy things and enjoy creating and spend time with your loved ones. I didn't mean to get really sappy on this, but it is what it is. When you get old, that just happens to you. Anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I want to do more musical analysis of albums I really like. Make sure to share, subscribe, all that. I'm really bad at this. I'm so sorry. But share, subscribe, share it with homies. I want to try and get to 1,000 by the end of the year, maybe 5. I think 1,000 is more. I think that's achievable. Let's do it. Fuck it. Let's do it. 1,000 subscribers, 1,000,000 subscribers. Let's fucking do it. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next Moose video. Stay gold. Bye-bye.